let me first give you a flavor of how the panel looks like. So before we decided the panel, we thought it's very important that we have some diversity in the panel as well. So we have Vishal, who runs the largest gaming company out of India. Naveen, who runs the largest mobile ad network out of India and probably the second largest in the world. And Sanjay, who spent a big portion of his life doing investments and senior corporate roles at Microsoft in the US, then I think at some stage he believed that the big opportunity now lies back home, and he has now moved back into India, is now a new generation entrepreneur in the digital space. And then Kunal, who first created an offline business and then realized the opportunity of using digital to create businesses which will take offline businesses online, and now runs a very successful couponing, group buying company out of India. I have been involved with a few ventures in my 10 years of career in India. I've set up a few companies which have now the leadership position in the media space. One of them is now owned by WPP, and one as a minority ownership by Yahoo. And currently, I'm more focused on e-commerce space. I run the largest private shopping, fashion retail business in India, and other B2C businesses in the couponing and healthcare space. So I think we have some diversity in the panel here. So maybe Vishal, if you could start by giving a quick 2-minute introduction about what you think the gaming space is. Maybe that could be a good starting point.
So India really is at a very exciting juncture. We currently have about 50 million people accessing internet on their mobile phones, and almost the same amount of people accessing internet on their PCs. However, one big shift is going to happen this year with finally, after all the regulatory and various issues, the launch of 3G and 4G simultaneously. We are going to have a very, very massive rollout. And in the next 3 years, our mobile internet base is expected to go to as high, depending on which number you believe, to more like 300 to 400 million people accessing the mobile internet. And our broadband base, which is like about 8 or 9 million today, is going to jump all the way to 90 million. So I think the opportunity which we are sitting on, especially from a gaming perspective, as we know in most markets, Facebook at the end of the day is also the biggest gaming platform. Gaming has ended up becoming a dominant share of when people use internet and people get access to high-speed internet, be it China, Korea. Already we are seeing in a market even as small as 50 million internet users, almost 12 to 18 million people download games on their mobile devices. That's the number today. And I think once we hit the 300 million number, we are going to be at a completely different scale. And I think the kind of numbers we see today on app stores and what's happening on Apple, I think the downloads in just the single market of India is going to dwarf all this. So I think we are at a very, very interesting juncture with the internet penetration taking off.
Sanjay, maybe this one is for you, right? So we all talk about the big opportunity, right? So I think the key question is, right, what is the sector, what is the genre where the big opportunities are? Because I get to hear a lot of varied opinions, right? So some say the big opportunity in India is in building digital infrastructure because, for really the numbers that are being projected, for them to be met, the real need, immediate need is digital infrastructure. Some say that e-commerce is the big opportunity, and pure B2C e-commerce is where, at least when I come from India, all investors are right now saying this is the year of e-commerce in India, and then e-commerce has seen the big opportunity. And then someone says it's the local models, which are there's too much of momentum around the globally proven models where, or the valley proven models, and all VCs are super focused on the valley proven models, whereas there's a huge opportunity for local domestic models which may not be existing outside of India. So what exactly do you think is the big opportunity? Because I think as an entrepreneur, that's the struggle that is going on in the mind. It's not lack of opportunities, it's can you pick the best opportunity?
My personal view is that it's the consumer opportunity in India. And although the consumer opportunity is fairly limited, I see a lot of things coming together. When I moved back to India about a year and a half ago, I started to look at everything with a very skeptical eye. I mean, I made the move, but then all I found were large problems, large obstacles to creating a consumer market. But over the last 18 months, I've been very, very surprised. Things like 3G, things like the universal ID that is starting to get rolled out, I think really will light the spark under the consumer internet segment. Whether it's e-commerce, consumer e-commerce, whether it's consumer local, whether it's consumer social, I think that's where the real promise is. And, I think that's where the real opportunity is, because once you go from, the 200 to 300 million phone users, mobile phone users, to maybe close to 1 billion, that becomes really interesting. Let me give you an example of why I'm so optimistic. The universal ID is kind of like a social security number. About 1 million of those have been issued. Over the next year or so, a couple of 100 million UIDs will be issued. And if you have a UID, you also get a bank account, and you get a mobile phone if you want. And I think that really changes the rules, because it enables e-commerce, mobile e-commerce, and it enables a whole set of transactions that didn't exist today. So I'm a big believer in the consumer internet.
So, Naveen, maybe you can share some thoughts on this. If we have 55 odd million internet users, and what?
On mobile?
And on mobile, total mobile user base is 700 million, and the mobile internet user base would be another, what, 50?
Right. So,
I think
it's
what close. Let me explain what my question is. Every time we get carried away by that big number, 700 million mobile users, adding 7-10 million every month still. So that's some statistic which kind of baffles everybody. But I haven't seen many companies really crack the code on how to really make the big buck out of those 700 million users, right? And as Sanjay said, that consumer digital consumer businesses is the big opportunity. Yeah. I think everybody believes that without mobile activation, that opportunity may look smaller. But is there a sweet spot? What is the missing link, or what is the opportunity on that?
Right. So I think over the last 2 years that we have built out our business globally, what we have seen is that in the last 12 months. So our network today globally serves to about 250 million people. In the last 12 months, we have seen the user base in India from mobile phones access internet go from, say, anywhere between 10 to 15 million to over 50 million. And that change in the last 12 months is a fantastic example of how the user and the supply side is changing. And as the user comes on board, I think many other infrastructural problems, whether it's the media, coming up and supporting the ecosystem, or the payment systems, etc., will start to happen. So I think, and as Vishal was also touching on that, so in the last 12 months, you moved from 10 million to 50 million. Our belief is that over the next 12 to 18 months, that number will move from 50 million to anywhere between 250 to 300 million. So what's expected in the next 12 to 18 months, that you will have roughly about 250 to 300 million mobile internet users using the phones. And that's primarily driven by 3G, drop in pricing of handsets, Android-based devices being launched in the market and starting to hit sub $100 price points, and the usage has just gone through the roof. And that's pretty much the story. And so if anybody has to create business models in India on the digital side, the primary driver of that would need to be on mobile. And we're already starting to see user base moving up. And so the monetization of all of that will also happen over the next few years.
So, Kunal, you run a very interesting business where your prime trade side customers are people who don't really understand what internet is all about. They are like small restaurant owners or spas, etc., who are still adopting digital as a medium. Yeah. How do you think the overall we've always heard India is different, right? And maybe for the audience, I would like to quote a few case studies what make us believe India is different, right? So the largest jobs company employs 1,200 field force of salespeople. The largest travel portal has few thousand people in their call center selling through the call center. Or the largest matrimony company. First of all, we had to create a matrimony company because a dating company would have failed there, right? Because culturally it doesn't fit there. Again, has these physical touch points. So, so there's a huge element of, if you look at any successful digital company out of India, the model that they've adopted it's a hybrid model. It's a combination of offline, online, and that's the only way they've reached scale. Or they've done some cultural alignment. Either they've made e-commerce an assisted e-commerce model from a DIY model. How do you think for a business like yours or businesses at large where, what kind of localization of business ideas would be required for them to really become successful in India?
Sounds good. So, wanted to do a quick show of hands. How many people have been to India or doing business with an Indian company, want to do business with an Indian company? Want to, I guess, is the biggest one.
It's too bad, not enough.
Yeah, it's encouraging. So, on a lighter note, I often feel that I actually agree with Sanjay that consumer space is very, very exciting in India. And if you're ever thinking of entering into India in the consumer space, you just need to know 4 letters, A, B, C, D. So Indians love astrology, Bollywood, cricket, and discounts, right? So as long as you are in a business doing any of these 4, you'll be in very good shape. And of course, E being the e-commerce, right? Yeah. So that's taking off.
So we're getting there, right? Yeah, soon we'll be till Z.
So, but to Harish's point, so I basically for 2 years, I moved back from the US and started building an offline coupons business. I actually am not from a technology background. Maybe that's what worked for us. Because we're running an offline business which is now enabled by technology, whether it's online or internet or mobile. We are agnostic. It's just a delivery medium. And I think in India, a lot of the companies that we also know of which have done well are primarily offline businesses which are enabled by technology and not the other way around. Typically, I've seen pure play internet businesses don't do that well or haven't done that well traditionally in India. It's just because that offline connect is extremely, extremely important. To Harish's point about the guy, the last mile is the small business owner in India who's typically like a 55-year-old guy, never used internet before, has a very expensive mobile phone but only makes calls with it. That guy, requires you to go and sit with him for 2 hours, 5 times before he gives you a deal. Right, so it's a very different sales process, even for otherwise known as an internet business. Very, very different sales process. As a result, it is challenging, but that's where you build value in the business in India. If you have very solid sales processes, offline sales teams, the right people, and that's how you build scale in India. And scale is actually the only strategic asset in India.
So I think, Sanjay, I agree. I myself am doing consumer businesses, but there's a big question there. So let's say on our fashion portal, 80% of the orders that we get today are cash on delivery. They're not credit card transactions. And 80% is a big number, right? If I have to deliver products more than $200 on a cash on delivery format, it's not possible. The courier ecosystem is not geared to handle that kind of transaction. And I can keep going on. Supply chain. So we are all talking about creating consumer businesses. Why is it that there is such low focus on creating infrastructure which is going to drive consumer internet?
Yeah, I mean, the trends are good. I mean, cash on delivery doesn't allow friction-free e-commerce. But if you talk to Kunal, in the last couple of months, 50% of his transactions are net banking, which is direct debit from his from a bank account. So, and I think with the UID, again, people getting more bank accounts, you'll see that proportion shift very quickly. So whereas the situation today is kind of grim, the trends that Kunal was telling me about and the promise of the new UID technology, for me, in the next 12 months, I think it'll be a complete flip. So, I think we're optimists, and the question is, will it happen? I think it will.
So just to add to this, 99% of all our transactions happen on mobile, where people are using mobile to make payments and download content. And we have a huge push over mobile payments. All carriers have tied up with banks, and you're going to have about a $1,000 limit on each of the phones to enable you to actually transact. So I think the mobile payment is actually going to become a game changer even for e-commerce. But having said that, there's one other very interesting trend. At least in our space, I would say 70% of our users are actually coming from smaller cities and towns. So these are not the metro cities who are consuming at least the content. Bulk of the usage is now smaller cities and towns. And in fact, talking about the offline model, we found out that when people buy PCs and get a broadband connection, they don't know how to play games. So we now have 400 people in our call centers who teach people how to play games. And that is the secret of how we sell online gaming in India. And it's completely anti, normally that's not how you do, and we spent a lot of money on TV and online advertising. But now, the way is actually making the consumer aware, and I think that is where it can
I think the ways to reach consumers and convert them are quite fantastic, very different than what you find in the US. And I think that's where most of the energy needs to go, will go. Infrastructure has been a problem so far, but I don't think that's going to continue for too long.
I hope you're not playing games with us, right? I think, so you said the real issue is not infrastructure. So my experience...
Just to be clear, there is an issue in infrastructure, but I think over the next 12 months it will flip.
Agreed. So my opinion is that the real issue is credibility for consumer internet or consumer digital businesses to really grow fast. The real issue is credibility, right? So at one end, you have the Indian Railways, which is doing 250,000 unique transactions every day, all digital, right? Which clearly means that there is, if there is the right business model, there is scale, the customers are already there, right? On the other hand, you have, if you segregate the Indian e-commerce market into digitally delivered products and physically delivered products, the success has all happened primarily in the digitally delivered products, right? So whether it is travel or jobs or coupons, primarily products which are being digitally delivered, right? I think the next growth of e-commerce has to come from physically delivered products. And it's the poor infrastructure which, my mind, is the real reason for poor credibility, right? Or do you think there is something else which will drive credibility?
So I think, while you're right that the physical goods delivery is important, I think it's still a while away.
Sorry?
I think it's still a while away where the physical good delivery and all of that can really drive the ecosystem. I think for the next 12 to 36 months, your primary driver would be the digital content and digital goods. And what we are seeing, we represent and we work with developers across the world. We are seeing, and there are pockets of these developers that exist in different parts of the world, whether it's on the West Coast and some parts of Eastern Europe, etc. There is a huge community in India which exists today over the last, I would say, 6 to 12 months that has started to appear. And those content that's getting created on that side, I think, are the next wave of commerce that will actually happen before you get down to higher ticket items. So I think the microtransactions that happen today are going to become far more efficient, and I think that's what's going to drive the value of transactions on the platform to the next level before UDID and infrastructure of that sort really kicks in to allow you for doing physical good transactions, which are just far more complicated.
Yeah, but I do think, India is hyper local, by culture, society, whatever you want to call it. And I think it's quite possible that people will make the purchase online and go pick it up, Because today you don't actually have awareness of what's available in your local area. And if we just did that, right, the delivery problem can be a pickup problem. And I think those are the kinds of innovations that need to happen in order to close the loop on e-commerce. And it will happen locally.
I actually think, I agree with what Naveen is saying, but I do believe that why physical product e-commerce is important in India and why fundamentally it makes sense, because it gives access to aspiration for a lot of people. A lot of people who do not, a lot of people beyond the top, let's say 6, 7 cities, do not have access to some of the coolest, best products that make them look good, smell good, feel good. And I think that's what e-commerce does more for India than anything else. And that's why I think physical products e-commerce, although we don't do it, I know that that's what works for physical e-commerce.
No, I kind of agree with Kunal because, and I'll like to share an example of our personal experience. When we started the private shopping business, which is more like a Guild or a Rulala, it's primarily a value-driven model, and our belief was that value-driven e-commerce models will do better than convenience or access-driven models. And we were surprised to realize that it's no more a value-driven model for us. There are more and more, a higher percentage of our consumers are actually buying products from us because of convenience and access reasons than value reasons. Of course, the initial uptake or the adoption of the platform was because of the value component of it, but it's 50% or maybe 55% of our orders actually come from smaller towns where access to those products or brands is not available. And I think my individual belief is that that's the big opportunity that digital has from an India's perspective, that it'll take probably 2 to 3 decades for the physical infrastructure to get developed to till the rural India, whereas digital can actually leapfrog and take, cover that distance in maybe 1 year. So I think that's...
On the virtual, so I have an interesting anecdote. So we do a lot of customer research, and one thing I realized that actually, I was thinking about it, kind of transcends into services also that are retailed online. So one of the big reasons why spa is such a big category in India is because men are a little hesitant in India culturally to walk into a spa and say, I want a massage, right? So they want to buy it in advance, so they know what it is. They've already bought it. They don't have to wait at the reception, so they just carry a voucher and just zoom in and lie down and get the massage, right? So small things like these, which are culturally very specific to India, play a key role in these businesses taking off, and those reasons may be different in different markets.
So media versus e-commerce. Sanjay, maybe you should take this one, right? So there are more media companies in India or more business models which are media-centric than e-commerce, right? Whereas my personal belief is commerce drives advertising, not advertising driving commerce. Why this imbalance? And that too for a market, the media market is relatively smaller. Are we saying that India is over-invested in media businesses?
No, I think you're absolutely right. There is no incentive to go into online advertising because there's not enough of a closed-loop e-commerce to drive that. I mean, India is one of the few markets in the world where newspapers is growing, right? And newspaper advertising is growing quite aggressively. So it is a wonderful, media market because that's where all the advertisers go today. So newspapers, TV, radio. I think online search-based or online advertising is just about the same as radio advertising. I think it's just overtaken billboard advertising recently. So until the e-commerce loop closes, I don't think you're going to find the online advertising market kind of supersede the existing ones.
So, obviously I have to comment on this one, right? Our belief is that the online marketing channel wasn't so large because there weren't users. Because there weren't users who were using PCs, you didn't have the push for creating payment infrastructures. Because you don't have push for creating payment infrastructure, it doesn't make sense for the online marketing entities to essentially plug money into this. So I think it was a vicious circle. I think where that vicious circle is now breaking down is you now have users on mobile phones, and as we talked about 50 million users today, 250, 300 million users, in a year or year and a half from now. So once you have that level of user base, there is a very different level of push that's getting created to set up the payment infrastructure, because that's critical. And that's why I talked about, as soon as you set up the payment infrastructure, the digital goods start to sell very, very quickly. That's the first segment, the easiest one to go on with. Our belief is that 2 years from now, $5 to $7 billion worth of digital goods will be sold in India itself. If that's the level of digital goods that will be sold, then you have a very different online advertising that starts to take off. And that's why we feel extremely excited about India. So when we started off our business 2 years ago, the focus on India wasn't there. Obviously, we were based out of India, but we focused everywhere else except for India. In the last 3 months, we have actually gone out and put together a complete team also for India, in addition to US, Japan, etc.
So are you saying there's an opportunity of global companies coming out of India now?
We believe we are one of them, but I think there will be far more coming out of that. And the reason being because now you have a user base that exists in the domestic market, using which companies can be created and then can be expanded into other markets, because users have very similar behaviors across different markets. And if that starts to happen, the services which are used in one market can be actually exported into other say emerging markets or even developed markets. And I think that will create far more number of global companies out of India. And I think that's an encouraging trend. And I'm personally, looking at several companies that, in addition to us, that are also starting to do that. And I think, once that happens, you have a very different level of companies that start to come out.
One of the most interesting things I saw after coming back is the number of entrepreneurs who are building product companies, who are starting product companies, building product companies. The old services, body shopping companies, that's not where the excitement is. Now, there's Seed Camp, there's lots of these, startup incubators in India. And a lot of the businesses are not very good and they're not very, smart about what they're doing. But this is the first step. And it's amazing that the psyche has just flipped in the last year or two to focus on product companies. And that's what it takes to build, I think, a large, internationally competitive, set of companies from India.
Yeah. One other thing just to add over here is that we are also seeing a very unique, let me say, war in terms of getting the cheapest handsets possible in India. And today you can buy a almost every second handset sold in India is a dual SIM handset. And now they even came with a quad SIM handset for as little as $10 and $15. These are mostly Chinese handsets. And on the other end, we have Nokia and BlackBerry and Android and everybody coming in. By the way, iPhone is not very, very big in India. And I know a lot of people from the West somehow assume that iPhone is a big market. iPhone is not. It's clearly currently dominated by Nokia.
And Samsung.
It's Nokia and Samsung which have the rule there. And what is happening is Nokia is now investing a lot into their own app stores. So with OV and, they have their own mobile billing company. There is M-Check, there is OboPay. So I think with a lot of people in the payment infrastructure coming in, a lot of people in the cheapest handsets coming in, it's going to be a different, it's certainly going to be a very different landscape of consumption.
Yeah, I just think Nokia is not going to make it. It's too late. It might have a huge user base, but I think it will be taken over by Android in the next 1 year.
No, of course.
Naveen is a big Android fan. I think that's what we all realized between yesterday and today.
Well, I think that's the only platform that's going to give the opportunity that will actually put smartphones across the majority of the population at the price point at which it can be afforded.
So I think we have just 5 minutes left. Maybe we should, I'll just try to summarize what I kind of got from this session. That the opportunity is big. What we need to realize is if you really want to succeed in a market like India, probably there's some degree of localization that you need to do. But the principal consumer behavior still remains constant. There are just these smart operational last mile workarounds that one would have to do. And I think we had a $1 billion plus IPO last year, and I think we're expecting another 4 to 5 this year. So the advice to European investors is there are too many American investors in India, and there's some serious imbalance between more European companies, whether operating or investment companies, seen active in India. So maybe, I really don't know what the reason for that is, but sitting in India, when I look at the most of the aggression coming from the West, whether it is in terms of businesses or the investment fraternity, it's more US driven, and Europe seems to be slightly slow on that. So my advice would be come, have a trip, we'll show you around. There's Steffi there. She can always arrange a lot of things. and we promise you that we are all willing to be good hosts and take you and show you the real opportunities live, how they exist. I think we have 4 minutes, so maybe 2-3 questions if you have any, and then yes.
Yes, Patrick Martin, Allegro Capital. So for a European investor, what would you recommend how to enter the market? Would you recommend someone to try and set up their own company, or basically look for local partners to do things with?
Access to the access to local partner, access to local knowledge is very important, right? Whether you do through that by having a good, smart local partner or recruiting the right local team, that's probably a decision which the individual fund will have to take. But I will highly recommend that do not, try and start making investments just by reading the reports that exist. There's a lot more which is outside the reports, which only local experience can do. And I think I would recommend co-investment as one of the best way to begin with if you really want to first explore and flirt with the market a little bit. If I was you, I would do a bit of co-investments and partner with a local existing company, whether an operating company or an investment fund. I would recommend that route.
So my question is, hi guys. This is Rafat formerly from Paid Content. The question is being two investors sitting up there, is the angel seed ecosystem, do you think finally sort of getting there? That was one of the big criticisms over the last few years in terms of encouraging entrepreneurs. And then on the other end, you mentioned one exit, but that's really an exit that was due 5 years ago. Do you think the exit ecosystem, one of the things that I've seen is that there are no exits for entrepreneurs. So
let me take that. Clearly, there is a huge gap if you want to get $100,000 funded over, $10 million funding. I mean, the challenge is that every Silicon Valley VC is now in India, and because of their cost structures and their deals, they can't write $100,000 checks. So clearly, there are now certain angel groups and individuals coming up, and Sanjay and I actually actively invest in early stage companies. So yeah, there is, if you have a decent idea today, it is not impossible to get the early stage seed funding. On the exits, actually, interestingly in India, as you know, that there are many media companies, local media companies, many industrial houses, but traditionally, these guys were spending millions of dollars in their own internet ventures. Well, easy to guess, most of them failed. And I think all of them are now realizing that if they need to have a serious plan in new media, the only way they can do that is now investing or acquiring at the right stage these companies. So I think the trend has already started. We already saw many media companies coming in. And I think going forward, our capital markets in India, by the way, are very, very attractive. I think a lot of our companies look at listing very much in India itself, and of course there is the option of NASDAQ or London. So there is definitely a lot of opportunity also, both at the local front.
Exit is not a problem, right? Look at me, I've done 4 in 10 years. So exit is not a problem, clearly, right? I think the real issue, I kind of agree with you that the angel investing ecosystem still remains the weakest amongst the complete value chain of fundraising, right? Whether that's because there are so many funds which are there in the 150 to 300 million range that they cannot start writing $100,000 checks. They'll have to, I don't know how many checks they will have to write to deploy their whole portfolio. So yes, there I sort of agree with you that there is a void at the bottom of the pyramid where the seed stage investment is, and I think people like Sanjay and
it isn't the money that's the problem. It's the time that can be spent with those budding entrepreneurs.
Oh yeah.
And the diaspora, my hope is the diaspora from the US, from the UK, around the world, once they see the attractiveness of some of these exits, they're paying more attention, they're spending more time. But you're right, Rafat, that's a gap that needs to be filled.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you very much. Okay, sorry.
Hi.
The zero there, so I don't know. Steffi, are we allowed to take one more question? Okay.
Hi, Alon Baner from NetVisio. You mentioned the love of Bollywood and also the specific behavior in India. Could you comment what do you think would be the evolution of business models around consumption of digital media?
So, there are more experts here than me, but I'm a consumer guy. I ran a detergent company in the US, right? So I mean, I think to Vishal's point, most of the consumption of media will be on the mobile going forward. I stopped reading a newspaper like a year ago, and I know there are many more like me. Likewise, I think majority of the consumption of media in that segment of India, which is 50% less than 25 years old, is almost primarily going to be on the mobile, whatever it may be.
I think the display, if I was to break down the media into bought and owned or earned, right? I think the growth is going to be much, much higher on the earned media side of it, whether you call it the social media or the platforms could be whatever, could be internet or mobile. But I think my belief and my experience being in a couple of businesses in the media space is that the growth rate of display media is going to be relatively slower than or quite slow, honestly speaking, than the growth of the earned media bit, the social media piece, because consumers are actually ahead of. So the market is actually lagging behind. The industry is lagging behind the consumer behavior. So there are more consumers who are talking on social platforms, and very few companies who are actually having any clue how to monetize them. So I think that's where the opportunity is.
Just to comment specifically on Bollywood, clearly today Bollywood and derivatives of Bollywood dominate the media and entertainment industry in India. There's no doubt. Every second TV show, we do over 1,000 movies in India. Bollywood content, namely music, is very popular, but 90% of them, unfortunately, is pirated on their devices, so people don't really pay for music. But ringback tones has got an amazing market in India with over 28% penetration. I mean, every second Indian you call, you may actually hear a Bollywood song playing.
It's interesting.
So
people pay money out of their own pocket for you to listen to a song which they never get to listen.
Clearly, so
they're paying for something which they will never consume.
And from a gaming perspective, clearly we see after cricket, which is the #1 games category, we see Bollywood gaming being very popular. So entertainment is
Just
really
one thing to add. Subscriptions in India are quite a viable strategy. I mean, Vishal has more subscriptions than transaction for games, right? And I think on the offline, on physical goods, cost per lead is probably the better, you go beyond the cost per click and just skip all of that and go directly to cost per lead. So I think the consumer will drive a lot of change in the models we know.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.